Japan, our days. It was a perfectly ordinary day. A girl comes to work and a colleague asks to enter some data in her place. It was just in time. She helped her out, and it happens a lot. They have a good relationship, they are used to help and rarely refuse. That employee was afraid to tell her superiors that she had to go away for some personal reasons, so she had to make an agreement with her colleagues. She promised that it wouldn't take long, and of course she would be grateful. Maria, her role, is a pleasant person who never loses the smile from her face. She is very polite, pleasant, and friendly. As always, it happens. Such people are very often used, even among this beautiful team. There are those who know that the girl does not know how to refuse. They ask her to work instead of them half a working day, and in return, do nothing, not even say some words of gratitude. The girl often thinks that something should be done about it. Not only that she does not have time to do her part of the work, but for all this help, she does not get anything, and could at least treat a cup of coffee or tea. It seems to her that it is better like this than to spoil the relationship and get hatred. It turns out that most colleagues leave work a few hours early at least, but she stays late because she promised to help and help everyone out. Suddenly, a notification came on my phone. My favorite game, Marriage in Heaven, reminds me. It says some hearts have been set and it's time to meet someone. This story is about a heroine with sacred powers who saves the world. She defeats her evil rival. She is loved by a prince and a knight. She is with those who are always ready to protect her, and the girl knows it. She is under reliable protection, so she is not afraid of anyone and anything. When it got very dark outside, it was the only time Maria was able to go home. She decided to try it so she wouldn't have to take any requests tomorrow. She wants to leave properly. She can't even remember the last time that happened. Sometimes it seemed to her that she was just being taken advantage of. But the girl liked to find excuses for everything, because maybe really, everyone had a lot of things to do, and it could not be that people just went home quietly, leaving their work to her so brazenly. Only on the way home playing the game, she has private time, and in such moments, Maria dreams of being loved by someone, like the main character in the game. She would give anything for someone to make her happy and forget about work for a day. And suddenly, just a moment after she thought of it, the girl sees a huge car in front of her. That's coming straight at her at breakneck speed and obviously won't have time to slow down. She didn't even have time to react. She immediately realized that to run away will not work, so it all turned out. The car hit her. Maria is lying on the road unconscious. Her phone is broken, and that man fled in an unknown direction. Very interesting how to assess this situation. It is the fulfillment of her wish or a regular accident due to inattention. On the one hand, of course, she really didn't want to die. But on the other hand, she couldn't go on like this, and she realizes it herself. After a moment, she realizes that it's not over yet. She's running somewhere for some reason, and doesn't realize that she's already in some other body of a girl with purple hair. Things have gotten very uncomfortable. She's in some kind of dress and feels like she needs to speed up even though she has no idea what's going on. It's all very much like a dream, only too believable. In fact, she recognizes that yard and that world tree whose glowing crown lights up the sky, a place she has seen very often through her phone screen. Suddenly, someone grabs her arm very suddenly. She doesn't have time to realize who it is and what purpose it serves. It's obviously a man, but whether or not he's to be feared remains to be seen, just like everything else that's going to happen here next. Suddenly, she becomes very painful. The lady felt a terrible pain and burning above the stomach. As if someone had wounded her, and very seriously. She turned to look around and saw 3 people in front of her. At first, she didn't notice who they reminded her of, but as soon as she heard the voice of one of them, the most important one, everything became clear. He was happy that she was finally caught, and also called her Elizabeth, a witch who destroys other people's lives with dark magic. In the same second, the girl gets answers to all her questions. There is no need to think about anything. Everything is so clear. It's the same world of the game called Marriage in Heaven. Before she died, she dreamed of this life, so she got what she asked for. Elizabeth, in any development of the plot, is a villain who is destined to die. Now she is very hurt and cold, but that's not what she was asking for. No one wants to be destroyed as soon as they get a chance to live in a new world. She really doesn't want it to end like this. Now she is half conscious, but still, because of the terrible pain, she can't even say anything, and she can't move either. But suddenly, something happened in the system, and Elizabeth's story is unblocked. It is not clear what it means, but the girl regained consciousness. And this is the main thing. Perhaps this is what a second life looks like, and a second chance to correct all their mistakes so as not to die in such a ridiculous way. She wakes up in the same body in some room and doesn't even know whether to be happy or not. It is possible that now someone will come again, and it will be the same thing again. The door opens, and one of the maids comes in to say that it is time for her to get ready, as her father wishes to see her in the hall and is anxious to talk about something. Elizabeth didn't ask unnecessary questions. She doesn't want to explain why she asks such things. She had to obey and hurry to her father's house. And in the meantime, she has already come to him, and instead of discussing something calmly, he begins to resent and shout how dare she be late, because long ago it was possible to wake up and not lie in bed for half a day. She is not used to such people. Usually she was treated very politely, but here it is the opposite. It will be very hard to get used to, because it seems that he will always be like that. Elizabeth's father, Count Neumann, though he doesn't show up in the end, which is about how the girl imagined him to be. He asked her to finally remember that if he called her, she should appear in just a second, and if she understood, she should sign some document and hand it to the butler. Lastly, he asked her not to repeat in his mistakes next time. He never explained what it was, so I had to ask, and it turns out it's an invitation to a celestial festival. Celestial Festival. It takes place once every 300 years, at which the heroine Florence was elected Lunar Maiden. It turns out that the opening scenes of the game are about to begin, and to keep his daughter calm, he warned that the Prime Minister and the church had received the money, so everything will go fine. Could it be that he gave them some money to get a benefit or a place that someone else could have gotten, and it is possible that it could have something to do with a gift for his daughter? As soon as the girl wanted to ask something else, he got angry again and asked who gave her permission to do that, since everything is already done, and she is required to just show up at the event. It is impossible to tolerate such an attitude. Elizabeth feels like a small child who can do nothing. She is not used to talking to people like that and does not understand how a father can behave like that towards his daughter. He even said that thinking is not in her favor. She should just follow orders, because her father decides everything instead of her, and nothing is required from her. The man thinks that she is not allowed to be worse than others, and he has already taken care of it in advance, as she should become a moon maiden, and he is ready to give any money for it. He would never forgive her if she did something wrong or gave up that status. The girl didn't listen to him. She just walked away. Because every second she was getting worse and worse. It was like he was taking all her energy away. And she feels it very well. He's too rough a father. And so far, that's the first thing she really doesn't like here. One can only hope that's the worst that awaits her here. It turns out that when she didn't say anything to him, because she knows that no matter how much her father wants her to be the Moon Maiden, the plot will make her Florence, and there's nothing she can do about it. From the very beginning of the game, the girl thought that her character, Elizabeth, a person unpleasant, but all because of her father, who is two overbearing and scary parents. No wonder that his daughter became like himself. In such conditions, to remain a kind person is simply impossible. No matter how hard he tries, his daughter will not be chosen to be a maiden even for money. She will never be able to defeat the protagonist and will just be destroyed in the end. That is her fate. It's a shame that the world of her favorite game will turn out to be a nightmare. Nothing good awaits her here, and it's unclear whether there's anything that can be done about it or not. If a girl had only one thing to do to make her dream come true in this world, she'd do her best from the first minute she was here. Perhaps she needs to change her character and learn what she could not learn in her previous life, namely to refuse people and think only of herself. Because before, her kindness and politeness only made her worse. She wanted all her life to achieve respect and something worthwhile, tolerating all the difficulties, but it was a mistake. Now she needs to answer the question of whether such patience and diligence is ever really rewarded at face value. Moreover, Elizabeth may die because of it. And suddenly, unexpectedly for herself, she has decided that it is necessary to finally make a change. If she had refused a colleague at work that day, maybe she would not have been hit by that car. She just needs to draw conclusions and start from scratch. She really wants to try to live selfishly, to do only what she wants and likes herself, and to help only if the person is that person and it will not harm her in any way. The capital of the empire, Reincarnation, a city blessed with the light of the world tree. Once every 300 years, a saint is chosen to be named Lunar Maiden. Having entered into union with the tree, it will fulfill only one wish, and that of one who is pure in conscience and heart, and no exceptions can be made. Heavenly Festival, people are already slowly starting to sit down. There are more and more of them. Everything has already been decorated here. We just have to wait for the main part. Florence is chosen to be the Moon Maiden. This is the opening scene in the game. Elizabeth doesn't even doubt that it can't be otherwise. She just doesn't believe it and has come to make sure and be happy for the man. But unlike the original plot, she wants to get rid of the villain episode, become a different person, and nothing can make her change her mind anymore. As soon as she comes to the center of the event, everyone starts paying attention to her, gossiping. Nothing changes, not without the fact that some would even purposely move further away to not say hello and pretend that they just don't notice her. One girl looked in his direction and the guy started to protect her. He said it was better not to look in that direction. If you talk to her, you can get all sorts of problems for the rest of your life. She felt very uncomfortable. Elizabeth feels at the center of attention. That's very good, but it would be better if people smiled at her instead of the other way around, avoiding her. Although it's terrible that the Neumann family is hated so much, it's just a consequence of the father's power and influence. He uses all methods, from bribes to humiliation, to make his daughter a moon girl. In fact, the girl can tell him everything and advise him not to spend so much money and effort, because he will not succeed anyway. But she just does not want to waste time on these scandals, humiliation, and everything else that his real daughter had time to suffer. He will understand everything only when really nothing will work out. Since the girl is already here, she has to execute the first stage of her plan. She planned to make her look less and less like a villain from now on. If someone smiles at her or starts talking to her soon, it will be considered that everything has been accomplished. She needs to get rid of the image of the villain, and the sooner she does it, the better. At least she will have new acquaintances, and maybe, by some miracle, will find love. As long as no one's talking to her, you can't expect a cute guy to come up to her and want to get to know her, so it's in her hands. For now, she really wants to meet the main character and see her in real life. It's her little dream that is now quite realizable. In the game, because of her arrogance, Elizabeth immediately took the position of her rival. She would not even listen to the fact that someone other than her would be chosen. The girl is sure. Then she took the bribe at her father's behest, so her confidence in the election is understandable. And afterwards came the shame of it all failing. Everything is very complicated, but at the same time, incredibly interesting. She likes this new life. At least she does not have to sit in a boring gray office. There are some prospects. Her future depends only on her. And also, which is very important, now there are no problems with money. She does not have to work because her father fully provides for her, which was not in the previous life. Suddenly, she happened to run into some girl, and it just so happened to be the main character she wanted to see. She immediately wanted to apologize, but turning around, she sees the man's face and realizes that she is speechless. She is so happy to see her that she doesn't even know how to act. Florence is a very nice girl. She did not resent it as any other person would have done, but on the contrary, for some reason thought it was her fault and even apologized. The main thing is for the girl not to be confused and to remember that this is a great opportunity to appear polite, not a villain as everyone expects. Perhaps Florence only started apologizing so as not to draw too much attention to herself and not to listen to the outrage of a villain from whom no one expected any apology at all. Florence will become a person of influence on world events. Because of her kindness, everyone will love her and protect her, including from the villain. In the story, she is the complete opposite of Elizabeth. They were very different, and so much so that they had nothing in common. Surprisingly, the girl didn't leave. She started talking to Elizabeth and even asked if she was a candidate or not, and then offered to go and take a walk together. Girl replied that she did not take part in one, but would be glad to go for a walk, for they had plenty of time to spare. She even promised that she would support her. This was heard by the people around them. They were surprised so much that they seemed to be frozen in one place like statues. No one would have believed her words, for it was impossible that the villainess should say anything like that. They suspected her of something at once and began to fear for Florence. At one point, two boys were walking past them, and one of them had an orange drink in his hands, very much like orange juice. When he saw Florence and passed by Elizabeth, he accidentally dropped his cup and soiled the dress of the villainess. Since he is a child and there are no parents around, he was very much frightened, for he knows very well what it can be, especially since he spilled the juice to me on someone else, namely the villain who hated children. He thought that was the end of it. He was not going to be able to get home in one piece. He regretted buying that drink and being near her. The girl didn't react. She didn't even have time to say anything, but suddenly, the boy's mom came up and started defending him. She apologized and explained that he hadn't done it on purpose, and if she wanted to punish him, the woman was willing to step up in his place. She started begging for the girl not to punish her child, and even almost cried as he did. In case the real Elizabeth was standing in front of them, it would be a very brave act. But now they had nothing to be afraid of. The girl wasn't going to punish anyone. After all, it was just an ordinary dress, and she saw for herself that it was just an accident, especially since she would never allow herself to get angry or punish a child. This is the everyday life of a villain who is hated, feared, and judged. On the one hand, she may be looked at with a disgruntled look, but when someone is wronged, people cry and beg for forgiveness. It's been like that up until now. From this day on, it's going to change, and it's a great situation to fix it. There's plenty of people around to see her as a completely different person. Instead of yelling at him and his mom, she calmly approached him, smiled, and first of all, asked if everything was okay. It was very important to her that the boy stop being afraid. The girl even promised to buy him a new juice. No one would expect that from her. People are all very shocked. They expected a scandal, shouting. But the girl calmed the boy down and didn't say a single bad word. Florence came up to her at once and began to admire how kind Elizabeth was, by which she at once embarrassed her. The girl had no time to reply, but suddenly, she turns around and sees the same guy who destroyed her the first time she came into this world. He asked what was here to drop by. But at the sight of Mr. Claus, the girl became very nervous. With him came the very ones she remembered very well. Prince is a very handsome and good-looking guy, but she doesn't have the best memories with him. It remains to be seen how he will react to her. In the story, he did nothing good for the villain. There was no way the girl could feel at ease around him, and it's not surprising. He is Florence's lover, and the man who must destroy Elizabeth actually, as happened that time. A popular character, also very handsome. But on the other hand, he is the cause of all Elizabeth's problems. They have never had a friendship, only hatred and hostile relations. He looked at her as if the same thing was about to happen that she remembered from that situation. The girl didn't even say anything, and he asked her what she didn't like. It was a very awkward situation because she didn't even go to talk to him. He misunderstood everything himself. It was strange, but for some reason, he thought that she had offended this boy, and no one even tried to explain that it wasn't like that at all. People were just afraid to even move. Before he left to go about his business, he asked her not to cause trouble on the day of the festival, otherwise he would regret it very much. Now that the opportunity had arisen, he said as usual that she could only use her father's power and look down on others. The real villain heard this almost every day and had even gotten used to it already. The girl remembered those words very well when she was playing the game. He said that almost every day as if he did it on purpose. It seems like it's going to be very hard to prove to this man that she's not the same person he knows her to be. It turns out that no matter how hard she tries, the story will still go down the drain. Suddenly, Florence decided to make things clear. She thought it was very unfair that he had misunderstood everything and started blaming the girl. She told me that Elizabeth was just concerned about this boy. She is very kind and did nothing wrong. Since Florence decided to do it, the other people immediately decided to back her up. They confirmed her words and said it was true. The kid just fell down and spilled juice on her dress. But the girl didn't yell at him and even calmed him down so he wouldn't be afraid of her. They all saw it with their own eyes, and there's no point in anyone deceiving him. The lady became so pleased that she doesn't even know how to thank them. She had never had so much protection from other people in her direction. And it's amazing that just a short while ago they looked at her in a completely different way. It turns out that everything can be changed. At least she is already treated much better. And for that, you should have just started with yourself and reacted differently than expected. This day had gone well. The girl hadn't even planned that everything would work out so quickly and unexpectedly, and she didn't even have to work hard at it. Meanwhile, that guy approached Florence and wanted to meet her. He asked who she was. The girl was happy to tell him a little about herself, and also asked him a few questions. She was very pleased to be approached by such a respectable man, and suddenly, so that she would not forget, he reminded her that it was time to hurry to the festival. So he showed his care. Because he was not used to talking to girls, it was the maximum he could do. He had even forgotten to compliment her, but everything was just ahead of him. And in the meantime, Elizabeth was beginning to see some indicator of sympathy. She didn't think she had such an ability. It certainly wouldn't be unnecessary. She was glad that their sympathy level was growing. She didn't have an ounce of jealousy. A real villainess would have reacted very differently. She just wouldn't have let it happen. Suddenly, his level of sympathy for someone dropped sharply, and it happened exactly at the moment when he looked towards Elizabeth and came up to her to say something. The girl at first did not understand why the index had dropped so much, and when she realized, she became very sad and even a little offended. He asks her what she's doing here, and this time she's going to have to say something serious. He's obviously not happy to see her. The main thing now is not to ruin the situation and piss him off even more. After she saw that he disliked her very much, and no matter what the reason, she didn't even want to talk and look him in the eye, much less explain or justify anything to him. In order to save the situation a little bit, Florence decided to help. She came up and said that Elizabeth was helping and even supporting her here. It's hard to believe, but at least she tried. Moreover, she called her her friend. It really looks like she decided to help and she's doing it well. It turns out that at first Elizabeth was in despair, did not see any prospects and did not hope for anything. But now she has a friend in the form of the heroine of her favorite game. Now there is reason to hope that everything will definitely be fine. She is no longer perceived as a villain, and this is a huge achievement. It's all in her hands now. She has to fight for a happy future, and if she tries hard enough, it's obviously close at hand. And then it starts. The guy doesn't trust the villain. He wants to rip off that fake good person mask, even if it takes a long time. He hates it very much when someone deceives people and tries to appear not to be what he really is. His main mission is to protect the Moon Girl at any cost. Now it's clear why he doesn't like it so much that they are friends now and will see each other much more often than usual. After the festival, Elizabeth decided to enjoy the world of her favorite game. She stopped thinking about problems for the first time, calmed down, and began to observe everyone around her. The city center is so lively that it can be admired all day long. People have very nice clothes. They are all polite and smiling. The girl felt herself in an ideal world where there is not a single flaw. There are even roads she didn't see in the game on her phone. She enjoyed going through all the nearby streets, and during that time, she never once stopped smiling. At one point, she got her saintly smile back, and decided to ask why the girl had come so early, though at the same time she was pleased that she had waited so long for her. Elizabeth admitted that she was really trying hard to get through early so she could see each other and say some nice words. Since they were meeting again, the lady wanted to spend this time in some useful way. She suggested going to a place where their family's tailor works. They could make a dress for the saint. It would be a sign of the beginning of their friendship. Florence loves to accept gifts, but at the same time, most of the time she is very awkward. She is now as uncomfortable as possible, although she doesn't want to give up her new dress either. In the original, there was a scene in which Elizabeth mocks Florence's clothes at the palace feast. So the girl wants to prepare for this moment, to make things happen differently. It's very important to her. It wasn't a pleasant situation, so it had to be avoided by any means necessary, now that they'd met. That was the first thing she thought of. You could say it was the decisive moment when the city hated Elizabeth. Everything must be done very quickly and without thinking. She asked Florence not to be shy because she could take it as a thank you for her help, if it would make her feel better. Florence is still considered to have done nothing special and doesn't deserve such an expensive gift. Finally, they've already hit the spot. There's plenty of options for every taste and color, and basically, there's a new collection here. It's unlikely anyone will have something similar. You don't even have to worry about it. And at that perfect moment, the saint wanted to confess something to her. Since they were friends, she wanted to tell her that, strange as it may sound. She used to be very much afraid that she would not make friends with anyone in the capital and would never have any friends. So she is truly grateful that Elizabeth has become her friend. It is the best gift for her that could be thought of. It was so sweet and pleasant that the girl almost cried. She had never heard any thanks from her, or rather she had never thought such a thing would happen. Right after that, the girl asked her assistant to bring her all the cutest dresses that would be suitable for Florence. She wants to buy everything. She's starting to like this day. It's been a long time since she went shopping with her friends. She feels so good for the first time, incredibly calm and pleasant. It's like this is exactly the person she's been looking for all this time. The former, she just adjusted to her surroundings and tried to make friends with someone, even though it was never mutual. The girl most often just felt superfluous and noticed how no one even talked to her. She just stood in the company and made it look like she had friends. She really wanted to be helpful to everyone. There was a situation where friends wanted to take pictures. She offered to be the photographer, and when it was her turn to join them and switch places with someone, everyone split up and she ended up not having a single picture taken with her. It was just no one wanted it. But here it's different. She was able to be friends with a beautiful girl whom she could only admire from the outside. And also, most of all, the most pleasant thing is that she proposed the idea and thus fulfilled their common dream. The girl is on her way back to her home and suddenly notices that on the way, there is some carriage and cannot move from the place. The assistant said that they have a broken wheel, and of course, to pass by, they could not. Very interesting, whose carriage stopped because most likely the girl should know him, and maybe on the contrary, will be recognized as just her. Some guy comes out of there and surprisingly, he's even glad that everything turned out this way. He didn't really want to go somewhere, and so he'll have an excuse why he was late and didn't arrive on time. Everything turned out even better than he wanted it to. He even asked his aide to take his time. There would even be time to rest. The main thing was to arrive as late as possible. It didn't bother him that it was the emperor's birthday, and he was one of the most awaited ones. They began to think how to do better, to arrive too late or not to arrive at all. But suddenly, they heard some sound, turned around, and there they saw a girl. It was Elizabeth. She came to find out what happened and asked if everything was okay. It was so dark around that she had to take a flashlight, although she was still a little scared in case it was some villains or people who hated her. When no one answered her, she offered to get into her carriage and promised that they would take them wherever they needed to go. As soon as the guy backed out and said it wasn't worth it, they'd figure it out on their own. The assistant intervened in the conversation. He got really excited and thanked him for his help. So they have a bit of a difference of opinion, and judging by the guy's reaction, he doesn't have the energy to even talk to the aide to ask them to stay out of it. He often likes to decide things up front and not ask what the Lord thinks about it. In the end, she did talk them into it. There was no telling how long they would have to stay in this forest. It was getting colder outside by the minute. They almost had no choice. Of course they are grateful, but because of their lack of mood, the whole time they remained silent and didn't say a single word. The three of them just looked at each other. And at some point, when it became too awkward, Elizabeth began to consider him as much as possible. His appearance is very interesting, so there was a lot to look at. She really wanted to see his face, but behind the mask you can't see anything. The guy doesn't even hide the fact that he's not happy about something. And in fact, Elizabeth was a little uncomfortable with it. The girl just wanted to ask where they needed to go, and he interrupted her and said he didn't want to talk. He was even having a hard time giving the address. Lastly, he asked her not to speak to him again, as if he'd forgotten that if it hadn't been for Elizabeth, he'd still be on the street. She had the urge to kick him out of the carriage, but since she'd offered to help, so be it. She just kept quiet. She didn't even particularly remember if there was such a character in the game or not. The girl had already turned around in the palace, and the unpleasant mood still remained. She was met by two guys and happened to notice her angry about something. Of course, they didn't miss the opportunity to say that no one had ever seen her in any other way before. She asked them to stop, and even at once recognized who they were, the knight's name being Elgar, and the sorcerer Franz. It seems like he's looking for a conflict, and of course, like everyone else, he started warning the girl not to draw too much attention to herself and not to make fun of anyone. Here is this beautiful, or rather, appropriate moment. The girl told me that she and the saint had become best friends, so his advice is inappropriate. She told him how their day went, how they picked out a dress, and how much she's looking forward to it. Franz can't believe his ears. He never thought these two would be best friends. And of course, there was an idea that the villain is trying to deceive someone, pretending to be a good friend, and in fact, something is planned. This conversation listened to the others, so the girl and the wizard got into the center of attention. So more people found out about this news, and it's even better, Elizabeth is gradually improving her opinion of herself as she had planned. One of the assistants shouts to the whole hall and informs that the Moon Maiden has arrived and asked to greet her properly. Everyone started looking in her direction to see the dress that her new friend had picked out for her, but for some reason, she came in the same one she had been seen in last time. Elizabeth was most surprised. She remembers the girl admiring and waiting for the moment to finally wear it, and in the end, came in an old dress. The situation became too awkward. Elizabeth felt a huge number of looks and smirks. Some even thought that the dress was terrible, and therefore did not dare to wear it on such an important event. She has a lot of questions right now. There's a slight sense of betrayal. Although that's over-exaggerated, she's just uncomfortable and wants to know what the problem is. If the saint had come out in her new dress, everything would have been so beautiful that this day could have been called the best. The girl came to ask, and Florence, as if she had read her mind, and immediately replied that she was just afraid to wear such a gorgeous dress. That's all. She was very nervous and wore the dress she had originally chosen. She is very sorry for what happened. She hopes for understanding and even regretted that she had done it that way. Actually, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a shame that people never made sure that they were really friends who spent all day picking out a dress and preparing for the day together. Immediately after this, the hall began a complete commotion. It was impossible to hear even himself. The main topic of gossip is now such, whether Elizabeth is cheating and whether they really together chose that dress. At some point, the girl starts hearing more and more of the very times that should be in the original story. And in her case, that's too bad. You need to come up with something immediately. If things continue like this, she will definitely be destroyed as a villain. She can't let that happen. It's too bad that the situation has gotten so badly messed up so suddenly. And even in the morning, everything was just fine. The Lunar Maiden is a pure of heart and soul girl who can show people the way to true happiness, but you have to be very careful. Because the brighter the light, the thicker the shadows, and this world is no exception. In the shadows of this land lurk terrible monsters. Controlling demons, and to preserve your life, you must never succumb to their charms. Suddenly, the very guy whose mission it was to keep Florence safe arrives. He saw the villain with her and reminded her of what he warned her about earlier. The girl starts to justify herself and says that she really bought a beautiful dress, and it's not what she had chosen. The yellow dress the saint had chosen herself. She shouldn't have worn it today at all. And also, she told the words that the saint herself said that she was just ashamed to accept that gift. Strangely, he took these words as if the girl wanted to mock the appearance of her new friend, though he was even disgusted to think that it was true and that Florence herself had suggested it to her. Then, another phrase from the original story is uttered. The situation becomes more and more dangerous. The girl takes great risks. She even got the idea that it was possible that they could speak in phrases from the game and couldn't say anything else. If that was the case, that was too bad. She's scared to even think about what could happen if things go the way they're supposed to in the story. It's very scary. He ordered her to leave immediately and warned her that if she resisted, he would be forced to use force and take her as an enemy. Although she was no different from a real enemy now, he was already treating her badly, so nothing would change. Meanwhile, as he took her by the arm and started to kick her out, the Duke stopped at the entrance. He had been watching them for a long time and seemed to be here for a reason. It was as if he wanted to influence something. The girl recognized him at once, but she was afraid to speak again. She had already learned that he was not talkative, and even thought that this was his way of thanking her. It was unlikely that the guy would dare to push the Duke, because it was even scary to look at him, let alone order him to step aside. He had to politely ask for it. But the one asked what he was doing it for, and made it clear that it would be very challenging, sounding ambiguous and very interesting. The guy explained that supposedly this girl was making a mess, so he decided to get her out of here, and then asked if there was anyone here who hadn't heard or noticed it. In that case, the Duke said his opinion that since they were throwing her out for making a fuss, if to act justly, you should kick him out. The guy with the black hair and the girl next to him, they all behaved inappropriately too, just like Elizabeth. So they should all get out of here, and forcing only one of them to do it is very wrong. These words made the guy angry in a moment. He can barely contain himself not to be rude. Also, the Duke said that today was His Majesty's birthday banquet. He even admitted that he had reluctantly come here, realizing that the Emperor's invitation must be accepted, and it was best not to refuse it. And if there was a reason to end this windfall and go home, he would gladly facilitate it. The girl heard those words and thought he was kind of weird, though he didn't seem as bad as he originally was anymore. Everyone around tried to overhear this conversation, and as soon as the Duke started arguing with Prince Klaus, everyone was puzzled, as if how he could do such a thing. The Duke of the Borderlands is the Emperor's nephew. His name is Mr. Helmut Weissman. He is from the royal family, but he is rarely seen. He is not a man who likes to talk to anyone, and in general, he prefers to stay home, be quiet, and if he doesn't see anyone during the day, it's his happiest day. Usually he is feared, and in those rare moments when he is present at the event, only when the guy goes home, everyone feels better. And all because of the rumors about the terrible demons that the Duke has subdued. Some have heard that he also kidnaps people. No one wants to communicate with him, and he is only happy to do so. But it seems that in the game, there was a character, similar in description to the Demon Lord, but his appearance was concealed and not described in any way, even approximately. He is feared by all the inhabitants of the capital, without exception. Perhaps that is why he wears a mask, so as not to scare everyone around, at least when he comes to an important event. Meanwhile, just as Elizabeth approached that Duke to thank him for his help, a saint came up to her with the same words. It was really bad timing, but anyway, she's always happy to have her. Florence was very embarrassed that she made such a fuss about it, so she wanted to apologize. The girl did not expect it and replied that it was all right. It was nobody's fault but those who meddled in the wrong business, and there were a lot of them here. After this hint, everyone turned away abruptly, as if they were not overhearing anything and were minding their own business. Then the saint decided to approach the Duke. She confessed that she was very glad to see him and asked him how he was feeling. Suddenly, unlike others, he didn't pretend it was mutual. The guy asked how one could be happy to meet a strange man, and then asked not to say such strange words and just be quiet. It was the first time she had ever heard such a rude reply in front of everyone. It was as if he didn't care what other people thought of him. The main thing was that the girl should not take these words to heart. Elizabeth decided to help her with that. She said that when she met him and spoke to him for the first time, he said the same thing. It was even a little worse. She explained that he was just that kind of person, and probably in his whole life. He had never once said anything nice, much less smiled at someone if he didn't feel like it. Only now did Elizabeth realize that if she hadn't helped him in the forest, he wouldn't have gotten here. So it was partly because of her. Now I see why no one likes to talk to him. He's clearly not a person who can be nice, sweet talk, or talk to someone just for respect and out of politeness. It's hard to get used to. Some still are, get offended and don't know it's okay. He's like that with everyone else. Meanwhile, the Emperor himself finally arrives. He began to look carefully at how people were feeling, whether they were happy or not, whether they wanted to go home or not, and in general, tried to feel the atmosphere of the evening. As usual, everyone pretended to be very happy to see him. He thanked everyone who accepted his invitation and said it was very nice that almost everyone had come. But what surprised him the most was that his nephew, who had only come a couple times in his entire life, usually ignored the invitation or said he had a lot of work to do, but this time even surprised him. The thing is, before anyone goes anywhere, it's very important for Elizabeth to get in touch with him, but it seems unrealistic because he's asked even a saint to be quiet. The Emperor said his speech. It wasn't long, though it could usually last even half an hour, and sometimes it was longer than that. Even he is much kinder than his nephew today. He approached him with a smile, but he didn't even say hello to him or look in his direction. It was very wrong of him. He was disrespectful, and a lot of people were looking at it. The Emperor felt a little awkward, as if he himself had approached the Emperor and asked for some attention. Suddenly, the guy says that if he was called to reprimand and shame him in front of everyone, he'd better go home and not linger too long. Instead of just stopping to pay attention to him, the Emperor started to justify himself, and it looked very strange, as if the celebration by the mere presence of the Duke. He's too disrespectful to the Emperor. Some people just can't believe it. It feels like the Emperor is going to get really angry at any moment and just kick him out. As suddenly, this is where the most interesting part starts. The thing is that the man was purposely being so soft and not angry in return just because he has a little mission. He wanted to talk about his fiancée, who is long overdue to be found. They can't even talk about it for years because the Duke is always against it. It's the most unpleasant thing you can think of. And of course, Elizabeth never ceases to amaze everyone. She's taken notice. Approached the Duke, took his hand without warning, and said a phrase after which even the Duke himself was shocked. All this time he stood motionless and did not even open his eyes. And now he looked sharply in her direction and heard that she wanted to become a candidate and become his wife in the future. At this point, things can happen in completely different ways. You don't know what you can expect, but it was worth the risk. At this point, a notification pops up that only she can see. It says something is unlocked and she's probably succeeded in changing the course of events. It was supposed to go something like this: Elizabeth, the hated villain, whatever the outcome of the game, must die. But she suddenly realized that there are characters independent of the plot, and that's a very good thing. That's what she just took advantage of. Everyone immediately started whispering, gossiping. There was noise in the hall again, but the guy did not think long and immediately refused. He does not even want to discuss it. The girl asked that he listen to her for at least a few minutes and said it was very important. He didn't even know anything about her. It was important to her that he didn't refuse so quickly. And at least, she thought, after all, it wasn't such a bad offer. Afterwards, the girl asked if she was not mistaken that his house was near the border, and hinted that she would very much like to visit there. The thing is, it's not as simple as it seems. If she stays in the capital for even one day, the main characters will want to get rid of her and will definitely destroy her. But if she gets in instead, which she didn't in the story, things could be much safer. He asked her to let go of his hand. He was getting very uncomfortable, and with everyone around them looking at them, she made it as awkward as possible. And also to tell him a few benefits, she started listing that she can cook. The house will always be tidy, and that's the minimum she can offer him. He came up with an answer very quickly and said he wouldn't invite any outsiders into his house, and it wasn't even up for discussion, so she might as well not even try. It turns out her life is on the line, and he won't agree to anything, which is a little harder than she thought. All hope remains only in His Majesty. He even came to her and asked her how sure she was of her decision, because it is a very serious step, and if she joins their family, there is no way to get a divorce. That's the rule. He says that, as she has already noticed, his nephew is quite a complicated man. After the death of his mother, that is, his sister, the Duke stays away from people. Everything is so serious that he doesn't even have friends. Though actually, if he did, it would be a great marriage to an aristocrat. It's exactly what they dreamed of, which means that maybe a man could help her with that, not right away, but at least maybe he could try. It so happens that the guy overhears this conversation and starts yelling at his uncle. He realizes that the man has the right to make this decision without even asking him himself. The guy starts to get indignant and says that this is not going to happen. The emperor replies that it's not his whim. They already have some bad rumors going around, and it's because of the character of someone. He's tired of fighting it, and he's old enough to think about it. Plus, he's already been suspended from his diplomatic obligations, so he should listen to him. Everything happened so seriously and so quickly that in a few minutes the emperor gave his first order, therefore, but not just to think about it and change his mind, but specifically to take her as his wife. Amazingly, for example, when she saw him in the forest and wanted to help him, she could not even think that in a few hours she would propose to become his wife. And the emperor would be so supportive of the idea that he would even give such orders. The man realizes that this is very serious, so he suggested that they live together for at least 6 months, and after that time it will be clear whether they will succeed or not, but in any case, they will have to move out. It is not even discussed and already decided, no matter how much someone does not want to do it. It turns out that the girl succeeded. Her risk was justified, but if she had not said anything and just stood aside, none of this would have happened. And besides, during these 6 months should pass the ceremony of the world tree, and then the plot of the game will come to an end. She is very much pleased with herself. Everything is going exactly as she dreamed. But even better, she even has the emperor on her side now. If it works out, she'll live safely for the whole time. The main thing is not to piss him off so much that he won't want to get rid of her before she's home. The plan is, one must somehow hold out in the Duke's house, and this term, and then one will be free to live in peace and her favorite game and enjoy life as she wanted to. At the end of the event, when everyone had already started to go home, the aide conveyed the emperor's wish that she should not do everything now at night. He asked her to come tomorrow morning so that there would be time to pack and prepare for a new stage in her life, and not only for her. The aide promised that the Lord would greet her when she arrived, but the guy said that wasn't going to happen and ordered her to finally leave here. It turns out he felt like he didn't want to come here and regretted agreeing to her help then in the forest. It didn't affect her mood anyway. Now the girl is only thinking about her safety, not whether someone likes it or not. Besides, she's not such a terrible roommate to get so upset about. She's sure to cook him a couple times a nice dinner, make him clean, not be too intrusive, and everything will be fine. The evening ended just fine. Everything happened in the best possible way. She's very pleased with herself, and now she can go home safely. She needs to regain her strength for tomorrow. Things would be just as interesting tomorrow as they were today, and just as she was about to leave, Florence came up. She watched them from the side so that she could approach then, so that everyone would be comfortable without interfering with everyone else's conversation. She came to say that she was very surprised, but at the same time, rejoiced that the emperor so readily supported the idea and even ordered the unapproachable duke to marry Elizabeth. The girl did not hide and said that the duke seemed to her a very gloomy man, and she was even worried for her because she would not be able to come to visit them and find out how things were going. She would be very lonely and anxious here. In that case, Elizabeth promised that she would come to the city very often, for she would have no friends there, and there was no trouble then to come here in a carriage. It's very important to them. They wouldn't want to be separated for a long time, especially after they've become good friends and spent time together. They had dreamed for a very long time of being real friends, giving each other some advice, gossiping and planning some kind of future, or better yet, picking someone's fiancé or something like that. It was a very difficult parting. They do not even know approximately when they will see each other next time. Everything depends only on Elizabeth. It would be a shame if such a friendship ends as quickly as it began. If all goes well in 6 months, they'll have a fun life in this world, like better friends who can't be parted from each other. She promised that everything would be fine and decided that she would definitely survive, even if someone tried to stop her from doing so. It all just takes time and patience, but more importantly, patience and believing that everything will work out. Immediately after her carriage left, the saint did not go anywhere. A yellow bird flew up to her, and at the same moment, the girl seemed to change. Her look was unrecognizable. He became somehow ominous. The girl began to discuss aloud with this bird that they were not getting anywhere, and the tone of voice he changed a lot. She says she even wore an ugly dress today and doesn't understand why the villainess acted like that. She was hoping that Elizabeth would behave according to who she is, but she was too kind and she really didn't like it. It seems that someone is not at all the person she seems to be. Lastly, she even got nervous and said a strange phrase that the villain's job is to make Florence look perfect against her backdrop, as she actually was before. And meanwhile, Elizabeth has already traveled very far. The next day has come. Now she's in the middle of a dense forest, and she is beginning to like everything already. It had been over half an hour since they had left. The Duke lived very far away, though the girl thought it would take much less time to travel, and they would arrive before morning had come. When her father learned that the girl was to marry a duke, was extremely surprised for a time, but then rejoiced and let her go with ease. It means that he doesn't care about her at all and only wants to benefit. Just like someone who pretends to be a saint, the girl doesn't even realize that all this time she has never seen her real face and naively thinks that this is the sweetest and kindest person in the whole world. In any case, it was very dangerous to return to the capital. It seemed to her that it would be best to think of coming to her friend's house. It would be most convenient that way. In the original story, the story comes to an end in 6 months at a ceremony at the World Tree. She should absolutely live to see that moment. And meanwhile, they finally reach their destination. It is very beautiful and cozy. Huge trees grow everywhere. There are lots of flowers around. Even the smell of the air is different here. She had never been to this palace, and never thought that one day she would not only be able to come here for a while, but that she would be able to live here for an indefinite period of time. The first thing that came out to her was the very assistant. He apologized that the gentleman did not come out in person, though the girl already knows that she should not have expected anything else from him. Suddenly, he comes from a completely different direction, where she didn't expect him to be. He was walking around the area, and so he decided to come over and say something, namely, that no one is happy to see her here, and she may not smile so much. And he also warned that the sun would be setting in an hour, and if she planned to go back, she'd better get out right away. The girl replied that he could hope not. She would never leave here again, at least not anytime soon. In which case, for starters, he asked if she knew about the rumors about him, because almost everyone knows about it. He's called a terrifying duke who commands demonic beings, but that doesn't bother her one bit. And she also asked him to stop kicking her out and communicating like that. It was important for him to know what she was up to before going in, though even if he did, it was unlikely anyone would admit anything to him. The girl didn't even bother to respond to that. She just said that she was sorry that her being here wasn't to someone's liking, but she promised that would change soon. So they stayed outside for a long time. He didn't want to let her in the house, even though he knew that sooner or later it would happen. And at one point, he deliberately started saying words that spoiled her mood. He not only insulted her, but warned her that he would make her stay here as unbearable as possible so that she would want to leave as soon as possible. He is not going to communicate with her normally or even think about forgiving her for such an act, because she could have asked him whether he wants it or not. And also, the girl saw the degree of sympathy from his side. The index is absolutely minimal. It even went beyond the lowest level, a bit unpleasant, but it's not surprising. It doesn't stop her in any way. He warned that he would soon be bringing her out to leave her here alone. He had a lot of things to do today, so he needed to think of something for her to do today. She had no acquaintance here, but he warned her not to distract him, or she'd be out of here sooner than she expected. And also, he asked her not to go out in the garden on a moonlit night and didn't even explain what the rule was about or if it applied to anyone else. After that, they just went inside with a helper, but she was never invited in. They left her outside as if she should come in on her own when she wanted to come in. She looked to the side to get her suitcase, but it wasn't there. And after that, the girl notices someone around the corner. She definitely saw someone as if hiding from her, and maybe not only her. It's all so weird, it's a little grim, especially considering where she is right now. Someone ran around the corner very quickly, and it would not be surprising if that person had a suitcase. Elizabeth did not chase after him. She thought it was one of the assistants. Though it was unlikely, she would have been warned about it at least. Not to get even more nervous, she decided to leave, walk around the grounds and calm down a bit. Maybe she'd just go into a room and there would be her suitcase there. She tried not to think about it as much as possible, because it would drive her crazy if she started to fear something, if it seemed like there was something dark and suspicious around every corner. Since no one invited her into the house and gave her a tour, she had to do it all on her own. She walked down the hall, and if it hadn't been for the incident outside, she would have been a little relieved. There is nothing to be done about the Duke's dislike of her, and there is a residue in her soul from the conversation with him. And if you think about it too much, you might cry. He's too cold and cruel like all other men. Lucky the Emperor treats her much better. If it wasn't for him, there's no telling what would have happened to her now. Just a minute later, just as she rounded the corner, she saw the very suitcase she came with. It's all very strange. She doesn't plan to look into it. Maybe it's some kind of sign and right next to the suitcase is her room. She thought of it first. At least it makes sense. His assistant came to the gentleman. He said he had taken the girl to the right place and asked him where to serve the food. He turned to him without his mask, which meant he hardly ever wore it at home, at least not before Elizabeth came here. He asked for the food to be brought directly to her room so he wouldn't have to meet her in the hallway or the dining room. And in general, he would like very much to ask, if it is possible, to make it so that the girl does not come into his sight at all, so that he even forgets that she lives in this house. Elizabeth had already had time to put her things in her new room, and suddenly, she didn't notice that someone had already brought a plate of food and didn't even say hello. There's a lovely breakfast on the table. Someone made scrambled eggs with sausage and vegetables. That's exactly what she'd like right now. It's very interesting how she's been in the room all this time, and suddenly, the plate of food appears as if it was brought by a ghost or an invisible person. Instead of eating breakfast at once, she went to the huge window and began to admire the beautiful view. In fact, she is used to eating alone. When she first joined the company where she worked for many years in her previous life, she wanted to distinguish herself. So after she stayed at work during one of her breaks and was no longer invited to eat with the others, it became common for her to eat alone. She just wanted people to like her, but she was seen as a convenient coworker who could be asked for anything, and it went on like that for many years. After a while, she wanted to walk around this house some more to get her bearings better and, just in case, find the right room quickly. There's so much space that it's easy to get lost, and also all the rooms are very similar to each other. It's hard to distinguish which floor it's on. It's like everything is purposely made very similar so that you, who are here for the first time, get easily lost. But maybe she's just imagining it and it's no big deal. Meanwhile, she's out on the street looking for someone. It became too boring to be alone. I want to hear at least some voice or sound. But during the whole time, no one has never appeared. It's as if everyone is hiding and doing it on purpose. In that case, she walked towards the garden. This road the girl had already memorized, but she didn't even think she would see a little boy. No one told her about him. She has no idea who he is or what he's doing here. Of course she couldn't pass him by. Plus, he must be in some kind of trouble. It was a child all alone. Elizabeth even felt that no one was with him. It was as if he was used to walking on his own, although perhaps his friend had just gone away for a while. The boy didn't want to tell her anything. He asked her not to come close to him, although he was badly hurt and she could have helped him. He says that no one here uses light magic, so he will figure it out on his own. Without its help, the main characters of the game had elemental magic. Klaus could control water, the others fire and wind. Florence possessed a healing which was called the magic of light, while Elizabeth's power was darkness, a destructive force to which no other could compare.